John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States, made his way up through the ranks starting in 1941 when he joined the Navy. For his time, he was awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Medal of Heroism. He was first interested in becoming a journalist, but he left the Navy at the end of 1944 looking towards politics. He won his first congressional position in the House of Representatives in 1946 at only 29. Here he began to gain some friction for his charming good looks and relaxed demeanor. After 2 re-elections in 1948 and 1950, he decided to try his hand in the Senate, where he took Henry Cabot Lodge Jr.'s incumbency seat in 1952. Fittingly, he married a beautiful, popular young journalist, Jacqueline Lee Bouvier, who would soon become the First Lady. His escalation to the presidency quickly ensued. He nearly earned the Democratic Party's nomination for vice president under Adlai Stevenson in 1956. At the beginning of 1960, Kennedy announced his candidacy for president and selected Lyndon Johnson, the Senate Majority Leader, for vice.
Senator John Kennedy of Massachusetts, Democrat, throws his hat in the presidential ring at a Washington press conference.
I am today announcing my candidacy for the presidency of the United States. The presidency is the most powerful office in the free world. Through its leadership can come a more vital life for all of our people. In it are centered the hopes of the globe around us for freedom and a more secure life.
Senator Kennedy, if you don't win the presidential nomination, will you accept the vice presidency?
I shall not on any conditions be a candidate for vice president. If I fail in this endeavor, I shall return and serve in the United States Senate.
His first win came when he defeated his primary challenger, Hubert Humphrey. Richard Nixon was his next opponent, a Republican and former 2-term vice president for President Eisenhower. This election year would mark the first ever televised presidential debate, with Nixon facing off with Kennedy.
According to rules set by the candidates themselves, each man shall make an opening statement of approximately 8 minutes duration and a closing statement of approximately 3 minutes duration. In between, the candidates will answer or comment upon answers to questions put by a panel of correspondents. In this, the first discussion in a series of 4 joint appearances, the subject matter has been agreed will be restricted to internal or domestic American matters. The first question to Senator Kennedy from Mr. Fleming.
Senator, the vice president in his campaign has said that you are naive and at times immature. He has raised the question of leadership. On this issue, why do you think people should vote for you rather than the vice president?
Well, the vice president and I came to the Congress together. 1946, we both served in the Labor Committee. I've been there now for 14 years, the same period of time that he has, so that our experience in government is comparable.
Mr. Vice President, since the question of executive leadership is a very important campaign issue, I'd like to follow Mr. Novin's question. Now, Republican campaign slogans, you'll see them on signs around the country as we did last week, say, it's experience that counts. That's over a picture of yourself, sir, implying that you've had more governmental executive decision-making experience than your opponent. Now, in his news conference on August 24th, President Eisenhower was asked to give one example of a major idea of yours that he adopted. His reply was, and I'm quoting, "If you give me a week, I might think of one. I don't remember." Now, that was a month ago, sir, and the president hasn't brought it up since. And I'm wondering, sir, if you can clarify which version is correct, the one put out by Republican campaign leaders or the one put out by President Eisenhower?
Well, I would suggest, Mr. Van Oker, that if you know the president, that was probably a facetious remark. I would also suggest that insofar as his statement is concerned, that I think it would be improper for the President of the United States to disclose the instances in which members of his official family had made recommendations, as I have made them through the years, to him which he has accepted or rejected. The President has always maintained, and very properly so, that he is entitled to get what advice he wants from his cabinet and from his other advisors without disclosing that to anybody, including, as a matter of fact, the Congress. Now, I can only say this. Through the years, I have sat in the National Security Council. I have been in the cabinet. I have met with the legislative leaders. I have met with the president when he made the great decisions with regard to Lebanon, Kimoy Matsu, other matters. The president has asked for my advice. I have given it. Sometimes my advice has been taken. Sometimes it is not. I do not say that I have made the decisions. And I would say that no president should ever allow anybody else to make the major decisions. The president only makes the decisions. All that his advisors do is to give counsel when he asks for it. As far as what experience counts and whether that is experience that counts, that isn't for me to say. I can only say that my experience is there for the people to consider. Senator Kennedy's is there for the people to consider. As he pointed out, we came to the Congress in the same year. His experience has been different from mine. Mine has been in the executive branch. His has been in the legislative branch. I would say that the people now have the opportunity to evaluate his as against mine, and I think both he and I are going to abide by whatever the people decide.
Senator Kennedy?
Well, I'll just say that the question is of experience, and the question also is what our judgment is of the future, and what our goals are for the United States, and what ability we have to implement those goals. Abraham Lincoln came to the presidency in 1860 after a rather little-known session in the House of Representatives, and after being defeated for the Senate in 58 and was a distinguished president. There is no certain road to the presidency. There are no guarantees that if you take one road or another that you will be a successful president. I have been in the Congress for 14 years. I have voted in the last 8 years, and the Vice President was presiding over the Senate and meeting his other responsibilities. I have met decisions over 800 times on matters which affect not only the domestic security of the United States, but as a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. The question really is, which candidate and which party can meet the problems that the United States is going to face in the 60s?
Oddly enough, the decision over who won the debate was a split. Those who watched it on TV sided with Kennedy, while those who listened to it on the radio sided with Nixon. This suggests that Nixon's ideas and views gained stronger support by listeners, while those who watched the debate were more focused on appearances, gestures, and body language. This benefited Kennedy because of his youthful appearance and calm composure. Kennedy ran with the campaign slogan, "A time for greatness," and "We can do better," reflecting his youthful and active approach to problems facing the country, such as the war in Vietnam and the Cold War crisis.
Do you want a man for president who's seasoned through and through, but not so doggone seasoned that he won't try something new? A man who's old enough to know
and young enough to do.
Well, it's up to you, it's up to you, it's strictly up to you. Do you like a man who answers straight, a man who's always fair? We'll measure him against the others, and when you compare, you cast your vote for Kennedy and the change that's overdue. So it's up to you, it's up to you, it's strictly up to you. Here's to Kennedy, 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 for me. Kennedy, 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 Kennedy,
He secured his spot in the presidency with the 303 Electoral College votes to Nixon's 219, and a close victory of the popular vote by only 112,827. He gave his inaugural address on January 20th, 1961. During his short time in office, he faced many considerable challenges.
You, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear
I, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear
that you will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States
and will, to the best of your ability,
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Well, Kennedy had been in the military, and he was famous, captain of a PT boat. So he was a war hero, and he ran for senator, but Kennedy was a fairly lightweight senator. He was the son of a very well-to-do man who'd Joseph Kennedy made his money bootlegging. But Kennedy had presidential ambitions, and when the elder son, Joe, died, well, the mantle fell to John Fitzgerald to be president. Kennedy had tremendous charm, and he had a beautiful young wife, and when he was elected president, he was 43 years old, the youngest president ever to be elected, and he had a young and beautiful wife and small children, and he symbolized Camelot and all the possibilities, and he made these inspiring speeches. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Now that shows some insight into leadership, because he might not have written his book. It was ghost-written, Profiles in Courage, ghost-written by Ted Sorensen. But he certainly understood that leaders aren't viewed as great leaders because of what they do for people. You can't do enough for people to gain their loyalty. They'll say, yeah, but what have you done for me lately? So Kennedy understood the way you get people to follow you is you inspire them to step up and do things for themselves. You empower them. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do. And droves of Americans stepped up to the plate and joined Kennedy's Peace Corps. And Kennedy introduced a civil rights legislation. Most of the things he wanted to accomplish did not come to fruition during his very brief presidency. Civil Rights Act wasn't passed until '64 under LBJ. But that inspiration that we're going to put a man on the moon within the decade inspired Americans who'd been shaken by Sputnik to believe, yes, we can. I really like his campaign slogan, we can do better. The idea was, we're okay, but we can do better. Let's pull together and do that. It's hard to evaluate his presidency because most of it was a disaster. I mean, it started off with the Bay of Pigs, which is about as big a disaster as you can imagine. But there are those moments, like that moment when Kennedy sat there in the midst of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and he had two messages from Khrushchev, and one of them was conciliatory and the other wasn't, and even though the later one was the one that was more dangerous, Kennedy decided ignoring that was the better part of valor, and he called on Khrushchev, and the two worked through the problem and avoided nuclear war. I didn't really understand what nuclear war was when I was in the 4th grade. I mean, they showed us the little turtle, gave us a hanky, and told us to duck and cover so we wouldn't inhale the nuclear particles. But I did know that nukes were bad, and that President Kennedy had risen to the occasion at crunch time. Now, he did some really questionable things. He was I don't know, he made Bill Clinton look loyal to his wife. He was quite a philanderer. He even had girlfriends that were mob malls. But it was a different time, and the press didn't poke into people's personal lives, politicians' personal lives. There was an issue of private morality versus public morality. So I think you can look at some of the things he did and find them extremely distasteful, but most of the public simply didn't know about it at the time. The first advisors were sent under Eisenhower, and Kennedy approved sending advisors, and so he left LBJ with a legacy that just got bigger and bigger because neither one of them wanted to be the first American president to lose a war. In addition to that, another very famous idealistic speech made by Kennedy was, will bear any burden, will pay any price, which sounds wonderful, but of course you know when 54,000 body bags came back from Vietnam, Americans began to reassess and say, well, you know, maybe that price is too high and maybe we won't bear any burden or pay any price. So I think idealism is a double-edged sword, and for all the things that President Kennedy inspired, he also left the door open to some very bad things as well. Well, I think that for most of the 20th century, presidents wanted to do something to help African Americans as citizens. The NAACP was established in 1912, and they campaigned incessantly to try to get Congress to act, to get the president to act, but presidents always had other priorities. FDR's priority was the New Deal, and he needed the Southern Bourbon conservatives, senators and representatives to go along with him, so just be quiet and go back to the back of the bus and sit there and wait a little bit longer. President Kennedy was put in a situation where he had to choose, and I don't know that he would have chosen to do that, but he did. He rose to the occasion, and it made a huge difference because it made a statement and it emboldened LBJ as his successor to push civil rights through the Congress.